Hello and welcome to the News9 Plus Show on the world's first news and current affairs OTT platform, News9 Plus. Now, the 2024 Lok Sabha elections may have seemed low-key and predictable even. It saw low voter turnouts in the first phase. The heat was, of course, only one of the reasons for this. Now, past elections have had emotive issues. 2014 was fought on anti-corruption. 2019 was fought on the plank of national security. But 2024 hasn't had a single issue until now. But that was until Sam Pitroda, the chairman of the Indian Overseas Congress, spoke out. Pitroda mentioned the need for an inheritance tax in India, which means that property bequeathed by individuals will be taxed in various slabs. Now, the Congress has distanced itself from Pitroda's remarks. But Sam Pitroda is a close Gandhi family advisor, and the issue has given the BJP fresh ammunition to target the Congress. Now, will wealth redistribution be the theme around which the 2024 elections will be fought over? And joining me to discuss this are Abhijit, Iyer, Mitra, Banuchandara, Nagarajan, and my colleague Brijesh Pandey. Brijesh, hua to hua part 2, it looks like.
Well, absolutely, and I think it's completely unwarranted. There's a phrase which you use in cricket,
yes,
that snatching defeat from the jaws of victory,
right,
with a slight alteration that there was no victory guaranteed here,
yes,
but unnecessarily landing the party in trouble. I mean, there was
right,
absolute no need for him to make this kind of statement, especially when you have a machinery like BJP who is willing to or waiting to lap up at any such comments to turn the entire controversy on its head.
Absolutely,
Sam Pitroda wittingly, unwittingly entered and has made the pitch queer for the Congress party. Congress party, which was kind of, was trying to convey that, not one issue is driving this entire election.
Right.
All of a sudden, they have inherited, apart from the party mess, they have inherited this inheritance mess landed in their lap by none other than Sam Pitroda himself.
They have inherited the inheritance mess, but Abhijit, is there some kind of conspiracy here? I mean, every time the Congress looks like it's on a winning wicket, it's got something to hit the government with, the special forces arrive. It's either Mr. Manishankar Iyer or Mr. Sam Pitroda who come there and deliver an issue for the BJP. And we were actually looking at our watches here in the office. How much time will it take the BJP to kind of pick this issue up? But what is the larger story here behind what Mr. Pitroda just said today?
The thing is, you left out Digvijay Singh and the biggest BJP agent of them all, Rahul Gandhi himself.
Right.
So what ends up happening out here is, it's a classic case of bad management style.
Right.
If you decide to have an agenda of redistribution,
yes,
it's a message that needs to be calibrated very carefully. You need to get the troops together, say that this is what we can say and do, and this is what we can't. Now, every manifesto tends to overpromise, and it's usually hyperbole.
Right.
Which is why the troops also need to be told how much they can play with hyperbole and not play with hyperbole.
Right.
The problem out here isn't just Sam Pitroda's statements, but when you add it up with everything that Rahul himself is saying, and Chidambaram has said in the past. Remember, Chidambaram wanted an inheritance tax in 2011. He then repeated it in 2012. And then when he, put out his press feelers to repeat the same idea in 2013, people like Adi Godrej and Co came out very strongly against it, very, very publicly.
Yes.
The problem then has become, all of these are, thanks to Google, you can retrieve all of them today from the internet.
Right.
Add to this the fact that even though the Congress manifesto doesn't promise too many things explicitly, Rahul Gandhi in his speech has been going completely hyperbole on this, on major level redistribution. When you use words like revolutionary, these are the kind of words that Mao Zedong and Hugo Chavez use. This is not the kind of language that is used. A revolution by its very nature is not the word you use in a democratic polity like India.
Right.
So he's basically, and when he says hum X-ray karvayenge, X-ray, what does he mean? The highest level of gold smuggling happens in Kerala, usually hidden in all kinds of things. Is it a message to his own constituency that they're going to be X-rayed a lot more when they come back from Guelph, as they call it? There's all of this adding up. It's not one thing individually. Right. Sam Pitroda is just the cherry on the pie, if you want to call it that. It's an accretion of events that's happened so far.
Right, it's an accretion of events, and the pie, speaking of the pie, Abhijit, Yeah, Banuchandara, there's two competing narratives at play. It seems like the BJP is talking about growing the pie and then, distributing it as social benefits to the people. And you have the Congress which comes out with what Abhijit said, this very radical, revolutionary approach of let's just divide the pie, and what the manifesto calls affirmative action. We don't know what that affirmative action means, but there's all these voices that are coming out of the Congress. Is it the inability of the Congress to clearly articulate a line like the BJP does, a party line, and then everyone kind of follows suit? Is that the problem here?
Democracy is a contest of ideas, right? And during elections, there are arguments put forth, and there are counter arguments. Arguments get refined.
Right.
So I welcome the debate, because however harebrained the idea might be,
yes,
it's good that it is there in the public domain and people are debating about it. Okay.
Right.
So, but it doesn't give away the fact that it's a harebrained idea.
Right.
Number one. Number two, it points to the fact that there is lack of discipline in messaging from the Congress.
Yes.
Third, even if they want to defend the idea, they don't have either the intellectual firepower or the oratorical firepower that is required to communicate it effectively.
Right.
In contrast, you have somebody like Prime Minister Modi, who is able to weave together so many data points together, right?
Yes.
Like he took up what is there in the Congress manifesto, what Prime Minister Manmohan Singh said in 2006, Congress's opposition to CAA, and Congress state government's attempts to have a minority quota. He's actually taking all of these together and weaving a story and saying it forcefully again and again. So it is a David versus Goliath sort of a thing. There is so much contrast in firepower from either side. So
yes.
That's how the campaign has been proceeding. But so let's also not forget that this is a very long campaign that is going to happen, Sandeep, right? It's like 7 weeks.
Yes.
And people have, there'll be new ideas that will be coming forth. I don't think this is going to stay as the crux of the whole campaign for a long time. So we'll have new ideas, and we will debate in news channels on those ideas later. So I
Absolutely.
think it keeps going on.
Brijesh, you agree with this point that there will be new ideas, or this is going to be it? This is the big idea on which these elections are going to be fought?
No. There are going to be new ideas. People have not lost faith in many of these motor mouths, and
yes.
there'll be new ideas, there'll be new controversies which
Picture
will.
बाकी है
Picture
अभी
अभी बहुत बाकी है. ये तो कायदे से बाकी है. This is just the 36 or 48 hours before the second phase of election. But
yes.
One thing I wanted to say is that when the biggest problem for the Congress party is
yes.
that nobody knows what one narrative they want to put forth before the public.
Right.
And the second point is that they themselves are not very clear about on what exactly pitch they want the Prime Minister to be defeated, and that confusion is adding a lot of confusion which is otherwise existing, with people quitting the party, no new blood is joining the party. Rahul Gandhi is behaving like as a infant terrible, that that no either I don't care if people don't vote for me, that's their fault. Right. And my idea is right and I'm right with everything. This kind of attitude doesn't actually work on the ground, and that is the reason why you are witnessing a long series of desertion from the Congress party, and even his own coterie, quote unquote, has 90% have left. So
the class of
he's not attracting voters. You're
yes.
not attracting new allies. 90% of your allies treat you as a baggage rather than as a support staff or someone which acts as a recalibrate the entire
yes.
situation. So it's a very the Congress party right now is in a mess, and when you add this kind of
yes.
this statement, Jairam Ramesh has immediately put forth a tweet saying that this is what Jayant Sinha has said, this is what Arun Jaitley has discussed about.
Right.
But the thing is that when you listen to Ron Gupta, has just left the Congress party to join BJP. He says when you have Jairam Ramesh as someone who's making you fight this election, then God save the Congress party. And this is one sentiment, Sandeep,
yes.
which is there in most of the beat reporters,
yes.
and which is there in the the second and the third rung of party leaders as well. That if these are our leaders who are shepherding us into this war,
yes.
then nobody can save us from getting slaughtered.
Right, absolutely. And we had Mr. Hemochandra Singh here in the studio not so long ago,
absolutely.
where he said exactly what you were talking about. Why a second generation congressman had to leave. But Abhijit, give us an X-ray of the Congress's thought process. It seems to have drifted. It's increasingly drifting closer and closer to a very far left socialist flank, which ideally the Congress has always been since the time of Mrs. Gandhi. We forget that. It was Narasimha Rao and Manmohan Singh that were aberrations to this leftward drift of the Congress. But is this is this going to go down this trajectory now? They're going to say, let's go with this socialist thing, far left Congress.
So, Sandeep, I'm going to disagree with you slightly there. At that particular time when we were a very, very low income country, huge parts of us were, below the poverty level. This kind of socialism worked in that sense. Indira Gandhi and Nehru were pragmatic in their own way. The thing is, once you enter this Manmohan Singh, Narasimha Rao period, India becomes a very aspirational society. That entire middle class created, they don't stand for redistributive justice.
Right.
This is why, Indira Gandhi was able to win elections based on nationalizing banks and Garibi Hatao and abolishing the privy purses and things like that.
Right.
Which, India doesn't have an appetite for that kind of thing anymore. So it's very curious on one hand that Rahul is bringing all this sort of thing back.
Right.
He seems to be getting back the old and tested formula in an age where that old and tested formula no longer works.
Right.
You see, if you, for example, sorry to use a colloquial example, if you want to jamaify dahi in Delhi, you just leave the dahi outside.
Yes.
But if you jamaify the dahi in the North Pole,
yes,
you have to apply considerable amounts of heat to it for the dahi to set, right?
Right.
So this is his problem. He doesn't get it. He's doing a cut, copy, paste, number one.
Right.
Number two, it's a complete breakdown of checks and balances in the party,
yes,
which you saw during the UPA era with the NAC. The NAC was kind of this extra constitutional supra cabinet,
yes,
which was taking decisions which the cabinet was just rubber stamping.
Right.
And Rahul Gandhi was this sort of zero responsibility extra constitutional eminence Greece, who was taking decisions which then would overrule the NAC and the cabinet. The very famous example being when he tore up that piece of paper.
The ordinance,
and then
yes.
go back on all of that. He has never had checks and balances placed on him.
Right.
And so what ends up happening is when you have a line where there is party discipline, when your leader, your prime leader, whether in name or in deed, vastly exceeds that party discipline, everybody else takes it upon themselves to exceed the line. And the problem with that becomes you never know when is too much, and you're basically you're not performing for votes. What Mallikarjun Kharge tried to excuse Sam Pitroda's behavior saying it's for votes. It is not for votes. It's for brownie points with Rahul Gandhi, because a lot of the distribution of jobs and seats within the Congress happens purely because of proximity to Rahul Gandhi, irrespective of performance. So this is a sort of performative art for Rahul. It is not a performative art for votes. It's a very, very toxic management and leadership culture.
Right.
And ultimately, as long as Rahul and this system of working is there, I see no hope for the Congress. No. It isn't because of Sam. It isn't because of Mani Shankar Iyer.
Yes.
It isn't because of Digvijay Singh. These are all the symptoms. The cause is the management style of Rahul Gandhi.
Absolutely. Very important point there, Abhijit. The fact that it's actually they're the symptoms and not the cause. And the point that you made also about Garibi Hatao not working several decades later, I was just reminded of the Tata Nano, if you remember, Brijesh, It didn't work simply because India had moved on from the Maruti 800. Nobody wanted to be seen driving around a cheap car anymore. And that's the reason the Nano didn't take off. But Banuchandara, this thing of the Congress's wealth redistribution thing, do you think it will actually find any resonance with the voters that, main tumhe itne paise dunga, I will, tax the rich, suit boot ki sarkar shall, lose their suits and their boots. Does this play out now with the electorate? We have 7 months, 7 weeks. I'm fully aware of that.
Sandeep, I traveled for 7,000 kilometers over the last 3 weeks. Starting from Delhi, I went all the way till Mokokchung in Nagaland and returned back to UP, Bihar. I have had so many conversations with poor Indians, normal Indians on how they see the government, what is the performance, what they're going to base their vote on, and so on. All of them are talking about rations, law and order, about opportunities for work, and how India's image is improved outside, and so many other things, right? So, and if you look at the Congress manifesto in general, it is giving the man a fish, right? It is not teaching the man how to fish. That's sort of a manifesto. And once you have that kind of a thinking, it is about the party apparatchiks and the government using the power to like give away stuff. That is the centralizing nature of that paradigm is something that we have seen in India for many decades, and we have suffered. Okay, and people have moved on. People are now, new India is looking for opportunities to work. And on the contrast, if you look at the BJP manifesto, it has been input based, right? So it's talking about infrastructure, it's talking about investment, talking about skill building, and so on. So I think the Congress party, because it has lost touch with the ground, it has not been able to capture what the electorate feels, and that feeds into the manifesto. The manifesto seems like a top-down, exercise with all the intellectuals and NGOs contributing. So I think the Congress needs to think about what it's doing and what it stands for, and all of that. And if not, you'll have arguments like this. You'll have somebody suddenly talking about wealth distribution without applying their mind on like how it fits into the whole scheme of things right now. So the Congress needs a lot of thinking, and they don't have much time as well, right? Just like six more phases to go. So let's see what happens. It's not looking good for the Congress.
Not looking good for the Congress, Brijesh, but what does the Congress do? They've been in full damage control mode today. What would be next? How are they going to put out these fires that Mr. Pitroda has set?
Well, I think damage control mode, but from whom and for how long? That is the bigger question. For how long are they going to do this and make sure that they run a smooth narrative or machinery to fight election till the 7th phase?
Yes.
And there's problems at so many levels that it needs to, the party literally needs to reinvent itself. Starting right at the top with the leadership of Rahul Gandhi before they can come back into reckoning and taking on the BJP. See, the point is that the BJP, which was the Prime Minister set a very ambitious target of 370, and at a time when everybody felt that election is a given, BJP is going to win and all. There's no one set narrative which is working for anybody. That is the reason why in the first phase we didn't see any
Lackluster.
Absolutely lackluster, any Ghuspaitiye, any such thing. So all of a sudden this Ghuspaitiye made entrance, and then talk about how one community they want to give it to minority community, raking up Manmohan Singh's old statement and all. So it wasn't like there was a definitive narrative which is working for the BJP also. But to look at it, this election which is anyways between David and Goliath, when you are handing over these kind of ammunitions to the BJP, and the Prime Minister has made 2 references, even quoting the LIC slogan that Congress ka loot zindagi ke saath bhi, zindagi ke baad bhi. So this was something which is completely avoidable and would have helped Congress in the long run.
Would have completely helped the Congress in the long run, but unfortunately that's not happening, Brijesh. And like you mentioned, it's David's handing Goliath ammunition, and it's not so much Rahul's Robin Hood promise as much as it's David feeding Goliath. But thank you very much, Abhijit, for joining us this evening. And Banu, I want to hear more about that trip that you made from Delhi to the northeast. We must talk about that at some point. Banuchandara joining us as well, and my colleague Brijesh Pandey here to talk about Rahul's Robin Hood promise. Will it work? Won't it? We have 7 more weeks to find out. The US and Russia are set to clash at the UN over weapons in space. The UN Security Council is due to vote on a US drafted resolution calling on countries to prevent an arms race in outer space. Russia is expected to block the US resolution. Now, there's a 1967 Outer Space Treaty that bars signatories, including Russia and the United States, from placing in orbit around the Earth any objects carrying nuclear weapons or any other kinds of WMDs. However, Russia and China are planning to put an amendment to vote in the Council. Now, will this amendment trigger a war of words in the UN Security Council? And joining me to discuss this are Robindra Sachdev, Group Captain Ajay Lele, and my colleague Deepak Badana. I want to start by asking you this, Group Captain Lele, the fact that you're one of the very few people in India who exclusively tracks the weaponization of space and space-related issues. Break down for us the significance of this vote in the United Nations Security Council. Why are Russia and the US fighting over this 1967 treaty, which we thought was all settled for more than 50 years now?
It so happened in the month of February this year, there were reports by the intelligence agencies from the United States that Russia is planning to have a nuclear-tipped anti-satellite weapon to be put into the space. That has triggered actually the issue in a very larger sense, in the sense that there are certain amount of fears that actually Russia may end up doing this. But subsequently, if you see the statements made by Putin, that he has denied that there is any sort of such agenda on the plate of Russia. But we all know that Putin had said that he will never attack Ukraine also. So nobody is
Right.
taking Putin's views directly. That's the reason why now US is concerned, and US is putting some sort of a mechanism in place, and they want UN to spearhead that mechanism, banning the arms race into outer space.
Right.
If you see, banning race into outer space is slightly, to my mind, a very loose proposition.
Yes.
Because before, some time back, US had already come out with a resolution in the United States where they had said that anti-satellite weapons, particularly undertaking the kinetic anti-satellite tests in the higher orbits, is not permitted, and many countries have actually signed on a dotted line about that resolution. India, rightfully so, had absented from that particular resolution. US is on one hand trying to put these things out into the domain of a United Nations debates and discussions, at the same time at a global level also. But if you see, China and Russia are trying for quite some time now. They have come out with the idea that we should not have a policy of somebody to put first the weapons out into the space. So Russia had come up with the idea that let's have some sort of a mechanism under the United Nations where we will say that we will ban a country to put first the weapons out into the space. Before that, Russia and China had worked on a treaty called PPWT, which is actually banning the weaponization of a space. So these efforts are there for quite some time. Every country is actually playing a game at the level of a United Nations. Because if you see, China did an anti-satellite test in the year 2007, which was followed by the United States in the year 2008. India also did an anti-satellite test in a lower orbit, which did not create any sort of a debris in 2019. And Russia conducted a satellite test in 2021. But the Russian, the Chinese test has ended up creating a lot amount of a space debris, which is problematic to various satellites, including their own satellites. So the debate and discourse on whether to ban weaponization of a space or not is there for quite some time. But if you really ask me, the basic issue which comes out over here, what we call as an elephant in the room, is a missile defense architecture. Because the moment somebody is signing on a treaty that we will ban weaponization of a space, the entire concepts of a missile defense architecture goes for a 6. Because under those circumstances, your BMDs or your S-400, S-300 or the American system called THAAD, they lose their relevance. To my mind, nobody is going to allow that sort of a treaty mechanism to come. These are the noises which have been made at an international level, and they will continue to happen.
Right, absolutely. Thanks for summing that up, Group Captain Lele, the very comprehensive overview of the weapons in space treaty. But, you know, the larger point that you mentioned, of course, is what I'm going to ask Mr. Sachdev, the breakdown of trust. You know what Group Captain Lele mentioned, that while all of these are known knowns, the breakdown of trust is what's happened, I think, after the Russian invasion of Ukraine the last 2 years. And now, you know, all gloves are off, and you're talking of deploying weapons in space, which is what a few months back there was a report. How do you see this? Is it inevitable now that countries like China and Russia will actually deploy weapons in space, as is being feared for many years now?
And also the United States, the US would also deploy. So it's inevitable. It's not only Russia and China, as well as the US. A couple of things. One, you know, this particular, let's say, issue has come more in focus after that intelligence report in the US. By the way, that report is not very clear whether they are talking about nuclear-powered anti-satellite systems or nuclear-tipped or nuclear weapon in the anti-satellite system. So those are two very different things. One, so that's one, I would say. Secondly, yes, in a big picture, absolutely, you know, I think there's no taking away, or nobody will deny that the space should not be weaponized. But that's in a utopian world. Given the world of today and the future that we are seeing, it will be in some ways or the other weaponized, without doubt. The other thing, you know, there's a little a twist here to this particular resolution which is out there. You see, the treaty which was passed in 67 or formulated in 67 was
Yes.
ratified or passed in the UN General Assembly by over 100 countries, including India. Now, that's one, okay. Now, this resolution which is coming up in the UN Security Council, this would be a resolution of the Security Council and then force down the throats of the entire international community.
Right.
There's a, there's a dissonance there. If there are rules of the game being specified, being developed, should not a country like India, of course I am biased for India, right? But should not countries who have a presence in space, who are, reaching somewhere technology, should not these countries be consulted for whatever the final,
Right.
the final regime comes out to be? So then it becomes again a manner of forcing down my way or the highway. This is the rules-based order that we
Yes.
want. Okay, who wants this rules-based order?
Very, very
We are
important
not-
point. Yes, a very important point there. And Deepak, a rules-based order, as Mr. Sachdev was saying, that you have these superpowers. Well, there's one superpower and there are two great powers who are sitting and making the rules of a club that they're going to create like the NPT for this. You see this happening? This is a possibility.
So, sir, as we were talking about it, a rules-based order, this phraseology has been used at virtually every convention over the last
Yes.
5-10 years and possibly from earlier on as well. But as Mr. Sachdeva just pointed out, the militarization of the final frontier is
Yes.
imminent. What we must understand is the implications should somebody be trigger happy.
Right.
What we are looking at is an absolute blackout of all communication systems,
Yes.
not just military systems.
Right.
We're also looking at key satellite functions such as, say, weather predictions.
Right.
All of that will be put back into the 50s.
Yes.
Should somebody pull the trigger?
There are excessive reliance on satellites.
That's something that I don't think we can do without anymore. So in an
Absolutely.
age where internet, your handset is connected,
Yes.
the fact that we may be pushed back into the 50s, it's a shock that most nations won't be able to take. So we have to understand,
Right.
and I would like the gentleman to explore this aspect.
I'm going to ask Group Captain Lele this point that Deepak raised. What would satellite weapons look like? Weapons deployed in space. We've seen them in movies. We've seen them in this very famous Bond movie, GoldenEye, where they have an EMP weapon from space. But Captain Lele, break down for us what space weapons, what are the different types of weapons that superpowers could actually deploy in space and deny space to the adversaries?
You see, there are multiple types of weapons. Broadly speaking, the category of weapons are a kinetic weapon and a non-kinetic weapon. Like when you conduct an anti-satellite test, at the end of the day, what you're doing is that you're launching a missile towards a satellite. The missile will be launched from the ground. The missile will not have any sort of a warhead per se. In a simplistic term, I can say there is a piece of a metal which is there with the missile as a warhead, and it hits on the satellite. The simple amount of the hit which is taking place, it ends up creating a kinetic energy. And that's why these anti-satellite tests, which have been carried out right by China in 2007, till what Russia did for the Cosmos 1048 satellite in 2021, are these types of kinetic weapons, where by just hitting a metal strip or a metal ball on a satellite, the satellite gets disintegrated and a lot amount of a debris get created. Now, the issue of a debris is the most important thing, because at the end of the day, that debris itself could emerge as a weapon, not in a classical sense, but if a debris comes in line of sight or where your satellite is moving from one place to other place, then the debris itself can destroy that satellite or at least impact the operations of that satellite. Now, why these debris are existing out into the space? Because as you start going up into the atmosphere, beyond a particular point, there is no gravitational force which is available. So whatever destruction of a satellite happens and the satellite gets disintegrated into different parts, that keeps on rotating out into the space. If I have to give some sort of a understanding over here, that if you recall the sad incidents of Kalpana Chawla's death, because when her space was entering the Earth's atmosphere, the thermal shield of that spacecraft had broken down. So the moment thermal shield had broken down, as you start entering the Earth's atmosphere, the temperatures are to the tune of 2000 to 3000 degrees Celsius. So everything melts down. So if you do an anti-satellite test in a lower altitude, like India did an anti-satellite test in an altitude of around 290 or 282 kilometers above the Earth's surface. The US had done their anti-satellite test in the year 2006 around 260 kilometers above the Earth's surface. So whatever was there in form of a debris got down and got melted because of the Earth's gravity. But that is not the case with Chinese test, which happened in 2007, where I think the intersection was done at around 850 kilometers above the Earth's surface. And the Russian interception of their own satellite was done at around 485 kilometers. So whatever debris was there is continued to remain over there. So this debris also becomes a sort of a destructive force for all the satellite systems, including their own satellite systems, and it can have an impact on it. So this is one form of it. Then what we call a category of a counter space weapons, you can have a what we can call as a space mine. That means my mother satellite goes into the space, and as and when the requirement is there, I will just release a small satellite in the line of sight of the adversary satellite, and just because of the impact, the satellite will get disintegrated. So these are the kinetic forms of that. Then there are non-kinetic forms of it, particularly the most important non-kinetic forms of it, where the world is doing attention, is the cyber means. That means you try to do cyber attack on the electronics of the satellite system. The moment the electronics of the satellite system is failing, the satellite is of no use. Then you can have certain amount of a laser attacks also could be mounted on the satellite system, where either permanently or temporarily you can jam the electronics of the satellite system. So these are the broad categories. Otherwise, what happens is that you change the orbits of the satellite, so on and so forth. So there are a lot of clinicalities into it. The most known weapon is actually a theoretical weapon, which is known as a rods from the board. That is basically to put tungsten rods out into the space, into a satellite. And as and when the requirement is there, you just release those rods on a particular target. The impact could be as big as Hiroshima. But these are the theoretical things. Nobody has put it because we already have got nuclear weapons. So you don't have to go to the space to create that sort of impact.
Yes, right. But Mr. Sachdev, the kind of weapons that Group Captain Lele mentioned, I'm sure every country in the world is working on similar systems and they're just waiting for the get-go to start deploying them. What do you think India must do to prevent the weaponization of space? And given the fact that we share borders with two adversaries who have a collusive arrangement, what must India do to prevent our space assets from being targeted with the kind of technologies that Group Captain Lele mentioned?
Couple of things. One, India must participate in the international regime which is being structured, or the so-called rules, whatever are supposed to be the architecture of this regime. India must contribute to it with our own, interests in mind, and our interests would be perhaps also generic to a lot many nations. In fact, to all nations should be there. So that's one thing. Secondly, we should definitely, progress like anything on our own technology, R&D, etc., both for our offense and defense. Right? It helps us nowhere if we say that, okay, we don't want, this should not happen, so therefore we will not do R&D in this area, and, just be caught like a sitting duck or something. So we need to kind of progress on that. We may not, test it or deploy it, of course, but we should be ready. That's one. And the second is the defense part of it. Couple of other things. You see, I mean, as the Group Captain was mentioning, there's several things. You could have satellites which are virtually like sleeper satellites. Like lurking or loitering drones, to use this terminology, right? Which are powered with nuclear power. So they can keep on circling for years and years or 50 years. And as and when needed, they can be activated by the country which wants to, which owns them and which wants to activate them for whatsoever, right? Another thing I think Deepak just now mentioned about the Space Force. Yes, America has created a Space Force officially. What is the purpose of that Space Force? Is it to count beads and, do prayers towards space? Russia has, China has. So when all these countries are structuring space forces within their military air force, it means they are preparing for that. And then there could be other things also. You see, not only that satellites killing each other and all, it could be the moon, for example. China could set up, or US or Russia could set up a base on moon, which could be a high energy nuclear reactor, because you need energy for laser weapons, right? And they could direct those laser beams, high energy,
Yes.
towards either the satellites or maybe back to Earth itself. Right. So the scenarios could be several and, countless out of science fiction itself.
Absolutely.
So,
Yes, worrying scenarios there from Mr. Robindra Sachdev and of course Group Captain Lele on what's at play here, where the big powers are sitting together and creating a new rules-based order, if you can call it that, in this space weapons race. And India, of course, needs to catch up. We need to be vigilant and man our defenses and prepare for what's unfolding, this new space weapons race. But thank you very much, Group Captain Lele, Robindra Sachdev, and of course my colleague Deepak Badana for joining us on this very, very burning topic that's seized the United Nations today.